Well, Downsview, it's good to see you here in the office at the church, and Lord willing, we will be back together again soon. We had a call with one of the pastors' fellowships that I'm a part of that's called the Hogtown Baptist Pastors Fellowship. Hogtown is an old nickname for Toronto, as I've come to understand. It used to be an abattoir down at where the CNE grounds down that part of the waterfront area used to be. And it's chaired by my buddy Paul Martin, who is a pastor of Grace Fellowship Church just down from us here in the Rexdale area. And Paul gets us together as senior pastors and brothers in the Lord to just connect and discuss things, and very kind of him to get us together again today on Zoom for, I don't know, fourth or fifth time since all of this has been happening. One of the things we were discussing was, as restrictions are starting to be lessened, or at least the conversation about that, as we heard yesterday that the province of PEI is looking at reopening things. Saskatchewan is starting to look into it, and Premier Ford is starting to announce more specifics about at least what it will look like in Ontario as that starts to happen and we start to move that area. For whatever reason, it seemed that we as pastors had heard a lot of reports in the news about folks who, well, they seem to be saying that, or they seem to be acting that as these restrictions have been lessened, now there's almost this stirring under there that, well, we should just meet anyway. Maybe we should just get together, and you know what, we just don't need to buy the science. The government doesn't know what it's talking about. Maybe we should just go ahead and almost this subtle underpinning of civil disobedient talk out there. Now, we're not much for that in Canada like they are sometimes in other countries, of course. Certainly we've seen large demonstrations in our brothers and sisters to the south of us. But we were really cautioning one another against that, and seeing that the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 13 to be really clear, to submit ourselves to the governing authorities. And those authorities are there because God has put them there. And we were reminding each other that the original context of that verse, of course, is not to a democracy like we have here in the West, that, you know, boy, we have representatives that we get to vote on. We can vote them out, and we can actually protest against them, and we can have meetings with them. I mean, the context of the book of Romans was a despot of a Roman emperor who was destroying and killing Christians for sport, for entertainment. And it's to those people that God moves the Apostle Paul to say, those authorities, yep, you're to submit to them. And there's no underlying sense that you're going to believe what they're about, or you're going to agree with what they're about, or you're going to take their point of view on things. You're going to believe their science, or whatever other excuses folks might come up with. Dear friends, there's a call for us to be people of the book who trust in God and therefore obey God by saying, okay, I don't understand and I don't agree with everything that the government's telling us to do, but God does. And God knew exactly what he was doing when he told us that we're to submit ourselves there. And I frankly find, I think I've said this to you before, but I find a great deal of liberty to be in a situation like that, to trust the Lord and say, all right, I'm not sure I get it, I'm not sure I agree with it all, but this is what you're telling us to do, and the gospel is still being preached. This is not some Acts chapter 5, do we obey God rather than man? God is not giving us nearly the kind of specific details in the scriptures that some of us might like to think that he is. And in the midst of that conversation, one of my new buddies, Justin Huffman, he's the relatively new pastor at Morning Star Fellowship in Scarborough, one of our Feb churches, just as Paul Martin's church at Grace Fellowship is. And Justin made, I thought, just a really remarkable point when he said, you know, one of the things that we need to be careful about is giving the impression to the world that the church is so fragile that she will just fall apart and smash into a million pieces if she doesn't get her way all the time. And what he was saying was that there's a sense that, you know, just because we can't meet for a season or meet as often as we want or the way that we want or as quickly back to it as we'd like, that somehow the church is just so fragile that, you know, it's just going to fall apart. And I thought, Justin, that just makes so much sense, because it's our witness to the world that we talk about wanting to have in so many cases. And we have such an opportunity to show ourselves and to show that God, really is strong enough to bring his people through this. That he's not going to bring a terrible difficulty into our land and then cause his church to be destroyed because of it. And it caused me to remember Matthew chapter 16, as the Lord was talking to his disciples, a somewhat familiar passage to us. But you remember that when Jesus came, Matthew 16:13, he came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked the disciples, "Who do the people say that the Son of Man is?" Errol just was writing a paper on this passage, and he and I were going over it recently and just reveling in how good it was here. And so who do the people say that the Son of Man is? And verse 14 says, "Well, they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you, my disciples, my followers, those who are giving their lives in commitment and surrender to me, at least in a progressive way at this stage in the Gospels." There's a lot of growing the disciples still had to do, of course, but he says to you, "Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter, of course, it'd be Peter, right? Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, son of Jonah. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you." He didn't figure this out on his own. He didn't look on the evidence and put it all together and go, this is it. He says, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who's in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock," the confession of who I am, this rock, you know the wording here, "on this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." And I just think magnificent hope that there should be there for us as a Christian church. That we may not be getting together for quite some time yet. I know that. We're starting to see restrictions talked about being lifted. We're a ways from being here on a Sunday morning on our knees praying with the brother deacons before we go, or out there in our sanctuary and singing God's praises together and walking by that foyer area that is now a place where we record the Sunday morning services. How long is it going to be before we're shaking hands here again, before we're hugging one another, before we're having our wonderful soup Sundays with, all of us jammed down into the basement like sardines? I mean, can't you? I so yearn for that. I can't wait for that. It's probably going to be a while. But friends, what's essential about the church is the Lord of the church. That's what's essential. No, the government has not declared the church to be an essential service. But Christ has declared the church as essential to his plan and his purposes in this world. And he says, "I'm building it. I will build my church. I will build my church. I will build it, my church. I will build my church, and it's mine. And the gates of hell are not going to stand against it." And whatever pandemic or whatever rules or whatever things are going on here, friends, it's not going to stand against our future in the church. So be of good cheer these days, friends. Lord bless you. Bye for now.